You think you know the story of Rumpelstiltskin, the strange little man who demanded a terrible bargain from a desperate young woman. It has been told for centuries as a simple children's tale, a warning against greed and rash promises. But what if I told you that beneath the innocent verses lies a narrative that may be one of the oldest surviving echoes of forgotten rights, of bargains struck not with men but with otherworldly beings? Hidden beneath the surface of this familiar fairy tale is something far older, darker, and more mysterious. Whispers of Rumpelstiltskin can be traced back through oral traditions that predate the Brothers Grimm, stretching into the folds of medieval Europe and beyond, into the deep past of Indo-European myth. Archaeologists, historians, and folklorists have begun to recognize patterns that suggest the tale is not just a bedtime story. It may be a memory of ancient bargains, sacrifices, and dangerous exchanges with beings humanity once feared and revered. Once upon a time there lived a poor miller who sought to win the favor of his king. Hoping to elevate his family's fortune, he boasted of something that was not true. He told the king that his daughter could spin straw into pure gold. Intrigued and greedy, the king ordered that the miller's daughter be brought to the castle. The young woman was locked in a chamber filled with straw, a spinning wheel, and a threat. By morning the straw must be turned to gold, or her life would be forfeit. Alone and desperate, the girl wept. It was then that a strange little man appeared. He was small, with sharp eyes and a peculiar smile. He promised to spin the straw into gold in exchange for something precious. The girl offered her necklace, and by dawn the impossible had been done. The next night, the task was repeated, and the little man demanded her ring. On the third night, the king gave her a chamber larger than before, overflowing with straw. If she succeeded, he would make her his queen. Again, the little man came, but now the girl had nothing left to give. So he demanded a promise, her firstborn child. Helpless, she agreed. The gold was spun, and the king, delighted, married her. Years passed, and when her first child was born, the little man returned to claim what was his. The queen was horrified, begging for another way. The creature offered mercy on one condition. If she could guess his name within 3 days, she could keep her child. Messengers were sent across the land, gathering names. On the third night, one reported overhearing a strange figure dancing around a fire in the forest, chanting his own name, Rumpelstiltskin. Armed with this knowledge, the queen confronted him. When she spoke his name aloud, he was undone. In a rage he vanished, defeated by the power of his own identity. And so the story ends, with the queen safe, the child unharmed, and the creature's dark bargain broken. The tale of Rumpelstiltskin, though recorded most famously by the Brothers Grimm in the early 19th century, did not begin in their hands. Like many of the stories they collected, it had lived in the breath of countless storytellers for generations. Variants of the tale echo through medieval German folklore, where small men, dwarves, or goblin-like beings were often invoked to explain the mysterious craft of smithing, weaving, or hidden treasure. The earliest recorded reference to a story resembling Rumpelstiltskin appears in the 16th century. A chapbook from around 1577 mentions a spirit who helps a woman complete an impossible task, only to demand her child in return. The bargain, the test of names, and the motif of secrecy were already in place. The Grimm's version, published in 1812, gave the story its enduring shape, but earlier renditions were often darker. Some ended not with the little man vanishing in rage, but with him tearing himself apart or being devoured by the earth, as if he were no mortal creature at all. Different cultures reshaped the tale according to their own fears and values. In some Slavic versions, the helper was not a dwarf but a demon, testing the boundaries of human and infernal bargains. In Scottish tradition, stories of beings like the brownies and the fair folk echoed similar patterns of trade, secrecy, and peril. Even in Scandinavian sagas, names carried power, and to speak a being's true name was to master it. The transformation of the story through time reflects more than literary taste. It reveals how communities once understood the thin line between human survival and supernatural danger. For peasants, spinning straw into gold was not simply a miracle but a symbol of impossible wealth, a temptation dangled by forces beyond human control. The young woman's plight was a mirror of society's dependence on promises, contracts, and unpayable debts. On closer inspection, the tale of Rumpelstiltskin seems to echo fragments of much older myths. Across cultures, the themes of bargains with mysterious beings, the importance of names, and the sacrifice of a firstborn child appear again and again. In Mesopotamian myth, the goddess Inanna descends into the underworld and is forced to surrender aspects of herself in exchange for passage. The motif of giving up something precious to gain access to power is deeply ingrained in ancient ritual thought. Similarly, in biblical stories, we see echoes of vows and sacrifices such as Jephthah's rash promise to give up the first thing that greeted him if he triumphed in battle, which tragically turned out to be his daughter. The central demand of Rumpelstiltskin, the firstborn child, also recalls traditions of offering the eldest to deities or spirits, a practice that scholars have traced to early agricultural societies. The first harvest, the first lamb, the first child, all was seen as belonging to the divine unless redeemed. The figure of Rumpelstiltskin himself bears resemblance to the trickster archetype. Like Loki in Norse mythology or Hermes in Greek tales, he bends rules, dances in secrecy, and thrives on hidden knowledge. His name, a riddle in itself, is the key to undoing his power. The idea that knowing a spirit's true name grants mastery is found in Egyptian lore, where even the sun god Ra could be tricked if his secret name were learned. The spinning of straw into gold, too, may symbolize an alchemical transformation. Alchemists across medieval Europe spoke of turning base materials into noble ones, not only as physical processes but as metaphors for spiritual enlightenment. The girl, trapped in her chamber, may be seen as the initiate undergoing a trial, aided by a dangerous spirit who tests the limits of her will. Perhaps Rumpelstiltskin is not merely a grotesque goblin from a folktale. Perhaps he is the lingering echo of ancient pacts with forces humanity once feared, bargains that balanced survival against the loss of one's most precious gift. In the 20th century, folklorists and archaeologists began to compare the tale of Rumpelstiltskin with other oral traditions across Europe and beyond. What they found was startling. Similar stories appeared not just in Germanic regions but as far afield as the British Isles, the Balkans, and even parts of the Middle East. In 1921, researchers in southern Austria uncovered fragments of medieval manuscripts describing the imp of the spinning wheel who offered impossible riches in exchange for a soul or a child. Even earlier, in a monastery library in northern Italy, a marginal note from the 14th century tells of a woman who bartered with a forest spirit for help in her weaving, only to be saved when she discovered his hidden name. The patterns were unmistakable. In Turkey, tales of a creature known as TPGs involved exchanges of human children to avert disaster. In Russia, folk stories of domovoi spirits show beings who help with household tasks, but demand offerings in return. In each, the same motifs repeat: a poor family, a task that cannot be done, a supernatural helper, and a terrible price. Linguists began to trace the roots of the Rumpelstiltskin story to Proto-Indo-European traditions more than 4,000 years old. A common narrative structure emerges. The poor human is faced with an impossible burden, a mysterious figure offers aid, a bargain is struck, and the cost threatens the very continuity of life through the child. Some scholars now believe the story of Rumpelstiltskin may be among the oldest narratives still told in Europe, preserved in fragment and variation, reshaped by culture after culture yet retaining its haunting core. The archaeological evidence does not present Rumpelstiltskin as a single story but as a pattern of thought and ancestral memory. Just as cave paintings across continents share images of animals and hunts, so too do oral traditions across societies share the image of the dangerous bargain. The tale we call Rumpelstiltskin may be the surviving fossil of that ancient memory, carried forward through centuries of storytelling. At first glance, the story appears simple: a girl in peril, a magical helper, and a clever escape through wit. Yet the details carry a deeper resonance when decoded through the lens of myth and ritual. The spinning wheel is more than a tool. In many traditions, spinning is tied to the fabric of fate itself. The Greek moirai, or fates, spin the thread of human life, measure it, and cut it when destiny ends. To spin straw into gold may represent the transformation of ordinary existence into transcendent power, or the turning of suffering into wisdom. The girl, trapped in her chamber, is not merely laboring at a wheel but standing at the threshold between mortality and the divine. The promise of the firstborn child is equally symbolic. In ancient societies, the firstborn often carried not just inheritance but the weight of continuity. To offer the first child was to risk the family line itself, a sacrifice echoing agricultural rituals where the first fruits were offered to gods of fertility. The bargain is thus not only about wealth but about survival, continuity, and the dangerous exchange between human and supernatural. The power of names is the final key. To name something is to define it, to establish mastery. The queen defeats Rumpelstiltskin not through force but through knowledge. His downfall is not a battle but a revelation. In this way, the story aligns with mystical traditions across the world, where secrecy and hidden words hold the power to bind or release. Perhaps, then, the young woman's ordeal is less about escaping a greedy king or a wicked imp, and more about undergoing a rite of passage. She faces confinement, terror, and the temptation of power. She makes a rash vow and must learn to undo it through wisdom. Her journey is the journey of transformation, one that humanity itself has repeated in ritual, myth, and dream since the dawn of history. The story of Rumpelstiltskin is often told as a cautionary fable for children, a tale about greed, cleverness, and the dangers of promises made too quickly. Yet when we peel back the layers of time, history, and myth, we find something far older and far more unsettling. What seems like a simple fairy tale may in fact be the echo of ancient rites, sacrifices, and bargains once performed by our ancestors. The girl spinning straw into gold recalls alchemical transformations, the weaving of fate, and the passage between mortal life and the realm of spirits. The demand for the firstborn child mirrors the offerings once given to gods and unseen forces to ensure survival and fertility. The little man with the hidden name is not a clownish villain but a shadow of the trickster, the spirit of contract and consequence, the dangerous other who cannot be ignored. To rediscover these depths is to realize that fairy tales are not trivial diversions but fragments of humanity's oldest memory. They are not just stories but vessels of wisdom, fear, and ritual, carried forward in the only way that could survive the centuries, through the voices of mothers, fathers, and storytellers around the fire. So the next time you hear the name Rumpelstiltskin, do not think only of a children's tale. Think of a story that has endured for thousands of years, bridging the gap between archaeology and imagination, between the mortal and the divine. It is a story of bargains, secrets, and survival. And if that leaves a lingering chill, it is because the past is closer to us than we dare to believe.